Good morning and welcome to the 8th edition of AE Talks. My name is Peter and I'm part of the Advanced Engineering team. Today we're hearing from Oliver Larkin, Head of Group Corporate and Public Relations at Volkswagen Group. Oliver will be taking us through Volkswagen's approach to climate change, electric cars, battery cells and software and connectivity. I'm sure there'll be plenty of engagement throughout. So before we get started, I'd like to take you through some housekeeping. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see a chat function, a questions function, and a polls function. Please do say hello, add comments, and share tips and opinions in the chat function. The more engagement there is, the better it is for everyone. It does make a slightly annoying sound, but you can mute this by clicking the audio button at the top of the screen. If you're having trouble finding it, it looks like a little bell. For any questions, please ask these in the questions tab rather than the chat tab. It makes it much easier for us to see them and therefore to give you the answers that you need. Note that questions can also be voted up so that the same ones are not asked multiple times. Oliver will look to answer your questions following his presentation. Note that Oliver's contact details will be posted in the chat, so if we don't manage to answer all of your questions today, you will be able to contact him directly after the event. At the end of the presentation, we will have a very short poll, which you will see in the polls tab. To participate, simply click on the tab and pick the answer you want to give. Without further ado, I'll now hand you over to Oliver, and I'll see you at the end for the questions and answers.
Thank you, Peter, and welcome to everybody to this presentation today in, as we all know, these quite unusual circumstances from home. I'm Oliver. I've been with the Volkswagen Group for 26 years, altogether 30 years in the industry, working in different places, and I spent 15 years in the investor relations team, the last 4 of which was working in Germany as the head of the team. So I'd like to take you through Volkswagen's electrification story, why we think it's so important, why we're investing so much money, and where we think we'll be in a few years' time. So we know the little bit of the history. I think most people will know that the Beetle was the start of Volkswagen around about the end of the 1930s and of course after the Second World War. The Golf came along in the 1970s and really that started the second chapter of the Volkswagen Group, and we're seeing this enormous growth of Volkswagen since the 1970s, where the Golf has been our leading vehicle. We see the Volkswagen ID.3 as the start of the third chapter, really, of the Volkswagen Group. And the ID.3 is a car built on a dedicated electric platform, which will spawn a number of different derivatives in the years ahead. The ID.3 was launched in the summer of this year, and the next models, the ID.4, the Q4 e-tron from Audi, and the Skoda Enyaq are sort of waiting in the wings now, ready to come to market. And we've launched 2 derivatives of the ID.4 already on the Chinese market. So this is really the next chapter of the Volkswagen Group. Why is it important? Why do we think electric vehicles are so important for us? Well, it comes back really to the Paris Climate Agreement, and it was COP20, I think it was, in Paris, where the commitment to slow down the growth of greenhouse gases was made. And Volkswagen was I think it was the first automotive company to sign up to the Paris Agreement. And the idea, of course, is to go CO2 neutral by 2050. And for us, CO2 neutrality, that includes the emissions of the vehicles on the streets. And if we sell 10 million cars a year, if you think a car has a life of what's 10 years, that means roughly 100 million cars are driving around from the Volkswagen Group. And we think that if we have a stop of production by 2040, those cars should have ended their life by 2050. And from that point onwards, only electric cars will be on the streets. And we will have converted our supply chain, we will have converted our production to CO2 neutral. And why do we think we need to take that leading position? This is a map of, or chart of, global CO2 emissions. And when you look on the transport sector, around 14% of global CO2 is produced by the transport sector. And that 100 million cars that I talked about means that Volkswagen is responsible for 1% of global CO2 emissions. And if you include commercial vehicles, that climbs to 2%, which when you think about the number of trucks and light commercial vehicles we sell, it's quite a small proportion of our total sales, but it just shows those heavy vehicles that are used a lot. But 2% of global CO2 is produced by vehicles from the Volkswagen Group, including our supply chain. So if we're serious about tackling the problem of CO2, we need to be part of that solution as well. And this chart, I think, just wants to really show you how serious we are about that. We will have around 70 all-new electric models by 2030. And we announced in November our 5-year planning strategy. And from that, 70 billion of CapEx, 70 billion of R&D. We're investing 35 billion of our investment budget into electric vehicles in the next 5 years. Overall, half of our CapEx and R&D is going into electric vehicles. Now, you might say to me, Oliver, that's only half. Why isn't it more? Well, the reality is, given the changeover from electric from the existing combustion vehicle range, in 2025, 80% of our vehicles are expected still to be petrol, diesel, and hybrid vehicles. So only 20% will be battery electric. But we're already investing very, very heavily upfront, 35 billion in the next 5 years. And we think we'll have 26 million electric cars on the road by 2030. And we will be producing electric cars in 18 locations around the world. I've got a notice to reconnect. Hi everybody, I'm back. Can anybody let me know if you're seeing me now? Okay, I think we are back. I'll keep going if that's okay. And yeah, let's see what happens. I think you can see me under chat as well. So I'm not sure where we were, but I'll just run over this chart again. I mentioned that 70 all new electric vehicles will be produced by 2030, and we're investing 35 billion into our electric vehicle range over the next 5 years. 26 million vehicles electric will be on the market by 2030, produced in 18 locations around the world. And it's not just the vehicles themselves, of course. Batteries is extremely important, and we're investing around $1 billion into battery cell production as well. We've got capacity already booked out to 2025. We're quite confident that we have enough cells, and we're also investing into charging infrastructure. Just excuse me, because I have this on another screen just to help me along as well. So this is the first car which we launched in the summer, the Volkswagen ID.3, winning lots of awards. People are, if you have never driven an electric car, I do recommend you drive an electric car, obviously one of ours, but other electric cars are available, of course, on the market. And I think you'll be amazed at the torque and the performance. And this car, very, very modern design, fantastic interior, and already selling extremely well across Europe. I think we are now already the top selling electric car in Europe. The Volkswagen ID.4, this is the SUV derivative, just launched onto the market. Delivery start in the first quarter of next year, as well as 2 derivatives in China. And of course, this will be our entry into the US market as well. I think you can see New York there in the background. We think this will be the biggest seller. SUVs, everybody knows, is a real trend. The electric SUV, of course, will address what is for some an issue about SUVs with the higher fuel consumption. But a battery electric SUV, it has the interior space, it has that feeling of security that people want in a very modern, very efficient design. The Skoda Enyaq is following also in 2021. This will be Skoda's first fully electric car after the Citigo. And again, great design, very well received when we've launched into the market. And just to say that, of course, electric cars are fun as well. You will be familiar with the Porsche Taycan, perhaps, from our sister brand, Volkswagen Group UK. We don't have Porsche, but we do have Audi. And this is the Audi e-tron GT. It's still in concept form because we haven't released the final photographs. It shares a lot of commonality with the Porsche Taycan. And again, this is launching in the first part of 2021. And we think this will be an absolutely amazing car. So just to highlight the importance of electrification, and PR, that's our planning round. It's our 5-year planning round that we have. And this slide just really covers how we are moving further and further into the electrification part of our business. And with 73 billion that you can see on the chart, you can see that we're stepping up year on year the proportion of spend that we're investing into electric cars. And we've started the first cars already, as you can see on the left, and we're now ramping up, launching into China, launching into North America, first of all with exports from the EU, and then we'll start production in our Chattanooga facility in the US in 2021 as well. And more models and greater segment coverage will come in the years ahead. And as you can probably see over my shoulder here, I'm a big fan of the Volkswagen bus. And in 2 years' time, we'll see the Volkswagen bus coming back in a fully electric form as well. So this is really a global story for the Volkswagen Group. This chart is really showing you the rollout, what you see on the left-hand side. And I know it's quite small, but these are the individual factories where we're launching MEB vehicles in the next couple of years. MEB, the electric platform, supporting these derivatives that are fully electric. And that rollout, I don't think in the 30 years I've been in the industry, we've seen that concentrated a rollout across the group. And we'll use this rollout as well as a way of standardizing our factory production, standardizing our supply chain, and standardizing the platforms as well. Now, we are experts, we think, in creating individuality for the car, for customers in terms of interior design, exterior design, and some driving dynamics. but it's really what you don't see. It's the core electronics, the core platform. We will share that as much as we can across the group to get our maximum synergies. And this is the share of sales in the years ahead, and you can see how this is split between the US, China, and Europe. And I think what you can see there very quickly is that China will really be the largest market for electric vehicles in the world. Some of you may have visited China. You'll know that there are lots of issues there around air quality, and you can understand perhaps why the Chinese market is really pushing hard on the electric vehicle. They're also using it from an industrial strategy point of view to try to sort of leapfrog. And we've seen with CATL, for example, the battery supplier, how the Chinese government has really been supportive of their expansion globally. But China will be, for vehicles, but also for the software and the mobility concepts, one of the key drivers in the years ahead. Now, we think this chart shows you 30% of our sales in 2030, and that really depends a little bit on where climate politics goes. By climate politics, I mean things like, for example, the end of pure petrol and diesel cars in the UK by 2030. That will, of course, push up the number of hybrids and the number of battery electric cars in 2030. We're discussing at the moment in Europe, so-called EU7, which are some a tightening further of the emissions controls. There's some very ambitious numbers being talked about, maybe too ambitious. That's open to debate. And if the US rejoins the climate change agreement, I think the direction is clear that more EVs will come to the market, perhaps, than even these numbers are suggesting. So that 30% may change. The restriction at the moment, really, from 2025, is simply the amount of batteries that are available globally, not just from us, but just available in the supply chain. And if more ambitious emissions targets do come to the fore, I think the battery investment side will be one to look at. Now, as we're adding electric cars to our portfolio, we're also, of course, thinking about what do we do with our existing combustion engine vehicles. So we've got a Golf, we have a Passat, we have an Arteon, we have a Polo in the marketplace. As we roll out more pure play battery electric vehicles, will we still need the same number of vehicles in our portfolio, or is it an ever more complex, ever growing number of vehicles? And I think what we're saying clearly here is that we will reduce by 35% the number of derivatives that we will have in the market by 2030. But you will see this slight hump as the battery electric vehicles roll out, but then that will gradually decline as we get towards the end of the decade. And I think what you see for us is what you'll see across the industry as well. And if you look in the supply chain, what you're already starting to see is some pain for those suppliers who perhaps are more focused on combustion engines and don't have the components necessarily in their portfolio for battery electric cars. So if you're producing pistons, if you're producing fuel injection systems, for example, where are you going to be in 2030? Where are you going to be in 2040? In our predictions in 2040, if you're producing fuel injection systems, your business is zero. So there's things for people to look at, and the supply chain is going through a lot of restructuring. You see some job losses being announced, but of course there are growth in other areas. In general, an electric car has significantly fewer components than a combustion engine car, so it's easier to produce. And of course that will have, in time, knock-on effects in the supply chain as well. Now, we all know that an electric car, its main component is the battery. The batteries are today very expensive. But what I would say to you is that majority of people in the UK and in other markets as well, when you buy your car, you typically buy it on finance, and PCPs are a growing part of the market. I think 80–90% of retail sales in the UK now are moving towards PCPs. And of course, a PCP, it's really about how much do I pay per month. And if you move to an electric car and you have a smart meter and you can charge your car at night time on cheap electricity, and we do think most people will charge their cars at night time, and we can come on to a discussion about people who don't have dedicated parking bays. But for those people who do, the total cost of ownership, when you add in your monthly fuel cost and your finance cost, we think is already today more or less in line, even in 2020. Now, what that means, of course, is as things start to move on and costs start to reduce, that the advantages of electric cars will only get greater. And of course, on the flip side, as emissions control become tighter, and you can imagine that perhaps taxes on carbon content on fuels increase as well, that differentiation will grow. And we think that overall, that in itself will start to drive the differentiation between electric cars and combustion engines. Today, of course, there are government incentives, but over time, as electric cars grow, that incentive will start to decline, and it will be purely down to the economies of scale and the developments on battery technology, which we can come back to in a moment. Now, electric cars aren't simply about the battery. It's also about the running costs, as I mentioned. We talk about the range, and the range for some people is always a question. But of course, most people drive 20, 30 miles a day. And when you factor that in, then even the smaller cars today are more than adequate. But of course, everybody then says, well, what about when I go to visit Uncle Joe in Glasgow? First of all, Glasgow's in tier 3, so you shouldn't. But coming back to that question, over time, the infrastructure around charging is going to be one of the big topics. And I mentioned earlier about batteries, we see a lot of development in the chemistry, and we see the development of solid state batteries, perhaps in the middle of this decade, promising smaller batteries with greater energy content. And fast charging, the ability to basically put more juice into your car over a shorter period, particularly on motorway stops, that's becoming more and more common as well. And it was great to hear that the government has started an investigation into the whole recharging industry at the moment. What the other factors driving sales? We think great design. I think really modern, really funky, great interiors. The acceleration is fantastic. You really get a GTI type of feel when you drive an electric car. There's no lag, there's no gearbox. The acceleration is fantastic. Plenty of space. You don't have a combustion engine, you don't have a transmission tunnel, and that opens up lots of opportunities inside the vehicle. Software is upgradable, and you can talk to your car as you would to your Alexa device, your Google device, whatever. Say hello ID, and then the vehicle will respond. And head-up display, the sort of things which are really only available on luxury cars. The ID3 offers that, and I've seen that in action, and it is just mind-blowingly simple. And you think, well, how did we not have that before? It's absolutely fantastic. So those things in themselves are probably enough to bring you to buy an electric car. What else is going on? Well, just to give you a quick overview of some things going on in the Volkswagen Group. And again, this is really industry-wide. You'll see some similar things, but we think we're a couple of years ahead of everybody else. We're talking with Ford. Ford and Volkswagen have a joint venture with looking into autonomous vehicles. We're invested with JAC, another Chinese company, and we launched an additional brand called Jetta in China. So those are our sort of macro story. On e-mobility services, we have a company called Elli, which is selling wall boxes that we produce ourselves. And Elli is also a provider of green electricity. It makes no sense to drive an electric car if your electricity is coming from coal. So we are a very big supporter of the so-called Saudi Arabia of wind that the Prime Minister talked about. And electric cars in some countries in Europe where electricity is predominantly coal produced, we think make little sense. But if you can drive a carbon price into that discussion, if you can secure green energy, then that makes an awful lot of sense for us. Ionity is a network of fast charging stations across Europe. They're setting up 400 of those stations, and I'll mention that in the picture in a second. Software-wise, the car is becoming like your mobile phone. It is a software device, and Microsoft is working with us on the so-called back end, so where your vehicle connects into our network. Wireless Cars, a business that we bought last year that manages communications from car to base. Volkswagen We is the services around the car, so the sort of things you can buy and how you interact and how you browse. And Amazon Web Services and Siemens are connecting a whole supply chain so that from a logistics point of view, we will have real-time tracking of parts through our factory systems. And we think that will deliver massive, massive benefits in terms of costs and lowering our stock. Technology, I mentioned QuantumScape. QuantumScape went public last Friday week. They're a Silicon Valley based company, one of the world leaders in the solid state battery. I think Bill Gates is an investor in that as well. Volkswagen has invested 300 million, I think it is, into QuantumScape, and we think we'll see the first solid state batteries coming to market in around 2025, probably at the premium end, and then that will trickle down through the network. Northvolt is a Swedish-based producer of batteries, and we have a joint venture with Northvolt to start producing batteries in about 2 years' time in Salzgitter, very close to our factories in Germany. And Goshon is a Chinese battery cell manufacturer where we're also invested, and we'll be producing batteries with Goshon in China. So what's happening locally in the UK? Well, just to come back, on the right-hand side is the Ionity network I mentioned to you, and there's 400 fast charging stations. Ionity is a company where BMW, Daimler, Porsche, I think Hyundai is now also a partner, and we want to make sure that people who are traveling the long distances, so I mentioned Uncle Joe in Glasgow, that you have a possibility for a rapid charge. And rapid charge means you get 80–90% of your batteries refilled in about 30 minutes at the service station along the main motorway networks. And as you can see on the right hand side, that's where we are at the moment, and we'll have around about 40 of those stations in the UK. On the left hand side is Tesco. There's one of my colleagues there filling up his car. If you drive along to Tesco, you can fill up your car for free. If you want a faster charge, you pay a very nominal price. Tesco has 600 stores across the country, and we're around about 270 stores already, and we'll be about 400 by March of next year. And normally you'll find about 3 or 4 of those charging points. And our partner there, PodPoint, is also installing those. I know other competitor to Tesco as well across the UK. So you can come, plug your car in, go to shop and come back. It's a little bit different than when you would normally go to a petrol station. An electric car is a sort of much more, I'm not using it now, is there a charging point convenient? I might as well just plug it in. Alternatively, you charge overnight on the cheap electricity tariffs, which the smart meter affords to you, some between, I don't know, 2 and 5 o'clock in the morning. I just really wanted to finish on this chart here. The government announced a 10-year plan for a green industrial revolution. And point number 4 on this was accelerating the shift to zero emission vehicles. And in fact, today is the launch of the green flash, as it's called. And the green flash is a marker on your number plate to indicate that your car is 100% battery electric vehicle. Probably hydrogen would count too, but let's go with battery electric for now. So from 2030, pure petrol and diesel cars will be banned from sale. Now, what they have said is that hybrid cars, which can drive a significant distance with no carbon, will be allowed. And we're just waiting to see exactly what that means. Is it 50 miles, 70 miles or more? And they will be allowed to be sold until 2035. And then we will be pure battery electric zero emission from 2035. And we think that's doable. We think that's something that can be done. But again, we would like to see a little bit more action from the government in terms of where's the charging infrastructure? Have we got a rollout plan that will enable people to remove that sort of worry that we hear that can they charge their car when they're out and about? So overall, I think what I wanted to say today was that for us, this change is happening. This change is real. We believe that the electric car is the future. We believe decarbonisation of transport is possible. Trucks, there are some difficulties, and we can talk about that perhaps separately, but at Volkswagen Group UK, we are a car business. We think it is possible. We think we have some fantastic products, and I would encourage you, if you haven't, to have to trial and to take a car out and really enjoy the benefits of electric cars. So Peter, I see you've popped up. I don't know whether you got kicked out as well, but apologies everybody from my side for the short delay, and I hope that didn't take away too much from the presentation.
No, that's perfect. Thank you very much, Oliver. It's most appreciated. We've done quite a number of these now across our group, and that's the first time anything like that has happened. So we can but apologise. But as you say, hopefully it didn't take away from the experience. But thank you very much, as I said, for the presentation. Just a very quick note for everyone who's on this session. We've just published a poll. You'll see it in the top right hand corner. It's simply asking your view on the presentation. It takes one click to answer, so it'd be appreciated if you could quickly have a look at that. We'll now move on to questions. I can see that quite a few have come in. So the first one that I have for you, Oliver, I hope you're ready for some good ones here. So Henry Sarrell Cook has asked, do you see hydrogen being part of the power source along with battery?
I think at the moment, the way that we look at hydrogen is it's been in discussion for a long time. And the difficulty with hydrogen is producing it in a clean way. There is some discussion about using surplus electricity at night time, for example, to produce hydrogen, and that obviously would make sense. But other forms of hydrogen production at the moment, be it via gas or something else, it doesn't really, for us, make a lot of sense when you compare the benefits of using battery electric vehicles. And we think there's a lot of potential in improved batteries, solid state, for example, in perhaps 5 years. You can use wind, you can use solar as well to be carbon neutral. So hydrogen for us at the moment is difficult to see for cars, perhaps in the future. I think there may be a discussion to be had for heavy goods vehicles. It's difficult to see how you get a 35-tonner to drive from London to Glasgow on electric. There are some trials in Europe where they're using pantographs for trucks on the highways as a way of reducing the carbon footprint. Perhaps hydrogen is an answer, but at the moment, I think for cars, the jury's out, and we are focused on battery electric vehicles.
Perfect, that's very clear, thank you. The next question we have is from Ali, who has asked, I know the main challenge with EVs is battery. What are the main challenges with electrical parts of the cars?
If we're talking about the non-battery parts, I think from Volkswagen's perspective, we produce 10 million cars a year. And by the middle of the decade, if we think 25% of those will be pure play electric, some will be hybrid on top of that, we'll be producing 2.5 million cars a year, let's say, roughly. So on that basis, we have started a process to move our own components division, where we have 70,000 people working globally, to start to look at, or start to produce, I should say, electric motors, the control electronics that go with that. We're producing mobile energy storage for charging stations, for example. So we are ourselves setting ourselves up as a major supplier on some of those components. And as I said earlier, with batteries, out till 2025, we're covered with batteries, and I think we're pretty good with all the other electronic components that go with that as well. So there's quite a good industry out there, and we're also developing very strongly our own competence in that area.
Super, thank you. There's a few variants around the next question, so I'll try to put them into one or a two-parter for you. So quite a few people have asked about your plans for recycling or remanufacturing the used batteries. And within that, they've also asked about the safety and service of these respective batteries.
Yeah, I mean, recycling, we think that the content of a battery, the materials, have a value. And therefore, we think that there will be a good industry dealing with the battery materials when they come to the point of being recycled. We do think there is a second life for batteries, and they will be used in either domestic or industrial energy storage to help to balance the grid, for example, or when people have solar installations. The other issue that people are finding is that the energy supply, perhaps at their workplace, if everybody turns up and wants to plug in, it overwhelms the local grid. So if you have a form of battery storage, then what you can do is charge up overnight, and when 20, 30 cars turn up to charge in the morning, you're drawing power from the grid, but also from your battery storage facilities. So there's a lot of work that's gone on about how to reuse the batteries as they are. And then, of course, we have recycling set up as well, and we have a recycling facility. I think it's already up and running. If not, it's about to in Germany as well. But we're quite early on that curve, but it's very much in focus. And it may surprise you to know that of a car today, we recycle, I think it's about 95%, if not higher, of a car. If you turn up with a scrapyard or whatever, 95% of that car would be recycled. There's very, very little waste, and I don't really see that changing. In fact, we may even improve on that with the battery electric vehicles. And in terms of safety, that's obviously been something which from the very beginning has been at the forefront of our design. And there, I haven't got the slide here, but you can click on our group webpage and see how the MEB chassis or platform is constructed, and there is a safety cell, if you like, around the battery, and that issue of crash, but also about managing overheating, has been fundamental to the way that we've designed our cars from the very beginning. So I can't rule out something will happen, you know, that's the worst thing you should say, but I think we've mitigated as much as we possibly can all of those issues, and it's something that the industry knows it has to deal with, and we've seen some recalls from a few competitors where they've had to address some of that. So far, touch wood, I haven't seen that for us, so hopefully that will stay that way. But I think at the moment, you know, you're driving around with 20, 30 gallons of petrol in your tank, highly combustible material, and we've managed to deal with that for a long time now. And I think with batteries, there will be some evolution, but I think it's probably not as risky as maybe everybody thinks.
Brilliant, thank you. I wasn't aware of the 95% of material recycled from a vehicle. So that's quite heartening at this stage.
And I have to say, Peter, if you look back only about 4 or 5 years, there was a point in time when the scrap value of a car in some markets was actually higher than the used car price, and cars were being stolen for scrap. So there is a big industry dealing with the scrap metal from vehicles and how it's recycled and refed into blast furnaces and stuff.
Fair enough. Yeah, I won't participate in that scrapping side of it, but yeah, we'll see. The next question I have from Stefan. How do you ensure scalability of your MEB supply chain to support the mass rollout of new vehicles globally?
Well, obviously, when we look at our supply chain planning, we take some high and some low numbers in our forecast, and we risk analyze. And I think when you look at our, again, 10 million cars a year that we produce, we have engine plants, gearbox plants, and other component plants which are scaled up in order to sort of feed that machine, as it were. And as we see this evolution taking place, on the one side, we will see a contraction of our existing combustion engine component business, and where we have 3 or 4 petrol or diesel engine facilities, you can see how we can contract that down as the market moves. Now, we will have our own forecasts, but then things like coronavirus come along, or government policies change, or people suddenly think, you know what, I want an electric car, I've suddenly been converted, and you see this huge jump which we've had seen in the last year. So it's difficult to manage, but because of our scale, I think we have perhaps more opportunity than others. And in our forward planning, we have, of course, spec'd out, and in that 35 billion investment that I talked about, there is investment into the supply chain in order to make sure that those components are available. You may find that a particular model is launched that you might end up with a 5 or 6 month delay in receipt because there is such a huge demand, But those are the problems which manufacturers love to have. Too much demand for a vehicle. But I think because we have this 5-year plan, and the 5-year plan in itself sits on the back of a 10 and 15-year market forecast where we think the industry is going, we have sort of baked into our supply planning those sorts of forecasts. And we do operate our business globally. It makes sense to source locally, but if you see that there is a shortage in one region and perhaps you have some capacity elsewhere, then we have these global supply chains to move parts around the world.
Perfect. Thank you very much. The next question from Elizabeth. Do we see any additional raw resource challenges coming as we move towards an electrified future?
You mean raw materials? I mean, we all know the issues around the DRC in the Congo, and there is a lot of discussion around how do you mitigate, how do you ensure that your supply chain uses sustainable sources. And Volkswagen, along with, I have to say, most of the car industry, is signed up to UN-led organizations who verify that the supply chain is appropriate. And we're all doing our utmost to ensure that there's no child labor or these indigenous mining activities, which have been shown to be very dangerous. As far as we know, that doesn't take place. If anybody evidences that is taking place, then we would investigate and shut that down immediately. We think there is sufficient raw material out there. Don't forget that the chemistry of a battery is different, and we do see different batteries with different chemistry in the marketplace. You will see over time perhaps premium batteries, and you will see ones perhaps more for the mass market, which will have a different chemistry inside. And obviously for the mass market versus premium, the more expensive chemistry is probably going to go into the premium batteries. It is something that everybody is managing, and we know that there are certain rare earths which have limited supply sources. We think we're good, at least out to 2025, and we're working beyond 2025 to ensure that those are sourced appropriately. And where necessary, we're not just, let's say, buying battery cells in, we're actually involved in the raw material resourcing that goes into the suppliers, which we're then buying. And as I said, we are increasingly producing some battery cells for ourselves. That's partly because it's a big cost component of the car, and we would like to be involved in that. But it also means that we're at the cutting edge of the chemistry, we're at the cutting edge of the evolution of battery cells, and we understand where the market is going, and we can have a view on the supply chain as well.
Super, thank you very much. And this kind of is almost a slight continuation. You mentioned about premium batteries and some for the mass market. Richard Clements has asked, how bad is the degradation of a battery life on a vehicle that has regular use of fast chargers?
To be honest, I'm not the expert probably to answer that question, but our batteries are guaranteed, I think it's 7 or 8 years, and even at the end of that period, we're talking probably about 80%. So there's, in terms of its usability, I think for most people that's more than sufficient. So we don't see that as a issue. I'm not aware of that as being an issue, yeah, perhaps that's something with technical forum people can pick up at some other time.
No problem. John Phipps has asked, do you have data on the average journey length of UK domestic car owners?
Yeah, I think the average daily use is something like 30-35 miles. It's even that is well, at the moment it's at the high end, of course. I guess like me, you're probably in lockdown at the moment. But it's really, really very low, and people worry. They want to have 200-300 mile range availability, but the average journey is about 35 miles, if that. So what we want to make sure is, though, is that when people do have those longer journeys, that they have the infrastructure available to them, that they can turn up at a service station or near to a motorway, near to an A road, and actually access fast charging infrastructure. And we have up to 350 kilowatt chargers now appearing on the market. And as I said, you can charge your car in probably about half an hour. And we saw, I think it was yesterday in Grays in Essex, this amazing facility for charging electric cars Even I think I saw in the news people on a spin bike adding a little bit of juice into the network. I'm not sure they'll get very far on the spin bike, but I think the point was, you know, again, within roughly about 30 minutes, you could charge your car and then be on your way.
Brilliant, thank you. Simon Davey has what may be a tough question for you. So he said that today dealers need regular service revenue. Electric vehicles require minimal servicing. How do you anticipate dealers will survive in 2030 and beyond?
That is a very fundamental question, which a lot of people are asking themselves at the moment. In the analysis I showed, we thought about 25% of our sales in 2025 will be electric, 2030, perhaps 30%. Of that percentage, probably more in China, less in Europe, and a lower figure again in North America and perhaps in South America. So there is a lot of vehicles passing, driving around. Probably the used car market is about 4 times the size of the new car market in the UK. So I think servicing, I think combustion engine vehicles, hybrid vehicles will be around for a long time. But if you transport us now to 2035, 2040, then I think you're right that there will be an evolution of the networks. Quite what that will be, I think that there's still some time to work that out. But absolutely, with software updates becoming over the air, with electric vehicles leading their servicing, then over time, I think we will see an evolution of networks. But I think that's something which we have time to think about and to plan together with our partners.
Brilliant. We're running a little low on time, so it'll be the last couple of questions. One which has already been touched upon, but it's a slightly different angle. So Desi Lee has asked, are you designing EV battery packs specifically with end-of-life recycling in mind?
Absolutely. I mean, we design a car from the first drawings. It's designed to be recycled. So the whole labeling, the demountability of the vehicle, how you, for example, demount airbags from a car which have explosives inside them, all those things are designed in at the very beginning of a car's design. And a battery cell, a battery pack is no different. So the car is designed to be recycled from the very beginning.
Perfect. Very clear. So the final question for today, and it's from Manoj. How heavily will VW be involved in motorsports in the future? Will we see more vehicles like the IDR?
It's interesting because there's been some developments in Germany recently where we've reduced some of our motorsport activities, which have perhaps been more focused on combustion engines, as the group is really focused on electric cars. I don't know. That's something which we'll see in the years ahead. Volkswagen as a group has fantastic history in Le Mans, for example, with hybrid cars with Porsche. Audi as well in Le Mans has a fantastic history. So I'm sure we will see the Volkswagen Group represented in motorsport in the future. But I think the view was taken that where motorsport is at the moment, it wasn't delivering necessarily the advantages that the investment necessitates. And of course, we're in the middle of a pandemic here, and finance is under a huge pressure for everybody. And the decision was taken that it was time to press pause. But there's a lot of fans of motorsport in our company, and I'm pretty sure we'll see motorsport in the years ahead as well.
So a nice positive note to end on as well. Thank you very much. So obviously, Oliver, thank you very much for your time, the presentation, and answering all of these questions. Thank you also to everyone who's attended today. It's good to have such an engaged audience. Feel free to follow up with Oliver in your own time if there's anything else that you need answered. But otherwise, I'll say enjoy the rest of the week. And I don't think it's too early. Enjoy the Christmas break as well. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.